And now, our feature presentation.
Happy Halloween, kids! oh man, what a time, what a month, what a season. Spooky season has finally boiled down to this, All Hallows Eve. And as per usual, kids, it's Dad here with a fascinating horror shooter just in time for you to go trick or treating afterwards. Realms of the Haunting is a first-person shooter. No, that's not right. Realms of the Haunting is a point-and-click adventure. No, that's not right either. Realms of the Haunting is a first-person point-and-click adventure shooter from developer Gremlin Interactive and published by Interplay. Released in the US on March 24th, 1997, Realms of the Haunting is a horror fantasy story that follows the journey of Adam Randall, whose estranged father Charles, a priest, passed away recently. Since his death, Adam has had a series of nightmares involving strange artifacts and a woman that he swears he knows somehow, as well as a visit from another priest who claims to have known Adam's father. All of this has led Adam to an ominous mansion in Cornwall, England, where the answers to the mystery surrounding Adam's father lie within. Now, this is a great fucking setup for a horror mystery game, all wrapped in an enticing game engine and intriguing gameplay, which we'll talk about in a second. But first, let's discuss the birth of Realms of the Haunting. The developer, Gremlin Interactive, was a busy little bee back in the 80s and 90s. For example, they developed an expansion for the original computer ports of Gauntlet, titled The Deeper Dungeons, back in 1987, something that was published by Mindscape in the US and by US Gold in the UK and Europe. Yes, a UK publisher named US Gold. Don't think about it too hard. They also developed Space Crusade in 1992, which is the very first video game to be set in the Warhammer 40k universe, as well as the 1995 top-down shooter Loaded and its sequel Reloaded, as well as the 1996 first-person adventure game Normality, a game which surprisingly had heavy influence on the development of Realms of the Haunting. Gremlin wasn't just a successful development studio, by the way. They were also a varied game publisher. One of the most notable titles that they published was a little game called Body Harvest, which was an open-world, vehicular sci-fi game developed by DMA Design, who would later go on to create the Grand Theft Auto series and eventually rebrand themselves as Rockstar North. Gremlin Interactive has had their hands in so many pies that this episode is starting to feel like it's going to turn into 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Back to Normality for a second. Looking at this goofy little point-and-click adventure game with stylized LucasArtsian aesthetics, you'd be hard-pressed to see any kind of connection between this and the FMV-driven horror story that is Realms of the Haunting. But the graphics engine that Gremlin built to run Normality was inadvertently the seed with which Realms of the Haunting would grow out of. As we can see here, the way Normality operates is that we control our character, voiced by, of all people, Corey Feldman?
I'm worrying about actually feeding it. Hang on. What's this? Defective. Partially deaf. Right on!
We control our character by navigating a first-person 3D space, and then interacting with the surrounding environment using traditional point-and-click mechanics. It was a pretty wild thing to behold, as most adventure games at the time utilized fixed camera angles or single-image slides, so this kind of fluidity of motion was radically innovative. Naturally, once Gremlin made the choice to develop Realms of the Haunting as their next title, it only made sense to take this same engine and innovate with it. In an interview with Retro Gamer, Paul Green, the game's writer and designer, spoke on how programmer Anthony Crowther had come up with an idea to combine the genres of point-and-click adventure and first-person shooter, all wrapped up in an original horror story. Despite Normality's first-person controls, it was fully and truly an adventure game in execution. Crowther wanted to push beyond the template that Doom had established by mashing these two disparate gameplay styles together. So when he took the engine and the initial concept to the pitch table, Paul Green then set about the task of establishing the game's story, mythology, and setting. Green stated that his inspirations for the plot were derived from films such as The Keep and The Thing, as well as Hebrew texts on the realms of heaven, earth, and hell, and the roles of angels and demons. On a particularly interesting note, Green also cited the conspiracy book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, published in 1982, as an inspiration for Realms of the Haunting. I say this is particularly interesting because the subject matter of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, a speculation on the life and times and possible descendants of Jesus Christ, also served as an inspiration for the 2003 novel The Da Vinci Code. As a result, the story itself is an impressive work, despite veering off into, vague territory at times. It's also very much a product of late 80s, early 90s horror writing, which infused a healthy amount of high fantasy into their tales. Think Clive Barker's Weaveworld or Imagica, or Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. Realms of the Haunting is 100% a product of that line of thinking, of that complexity of world building and ominous atmosphere, alongside the sometimes silly, oftentimes confusing list of characters, side stories, lore, and unexplainable mythology. Look, kids, I love The Dark Tower just as much as the next guy, but when Uncle Steve inserted himself as an important character in his own universe, it got a little weird. One thing that was decided fairly early into development was that full motion video would be a key component of telling the game's story. Now, around this time, FMV was quickly becoming the hot thing in computer gaming, particularly since the birth of the CD-ROM drive in the early 90s. But Gremlin wanted to ensure that it wouldn't simply be a gimmick for their title. They hired a company called Bright Light Studios to handle the filming, prosthetics, makeup, props, and costumes for all of the various cutscenes necessary for the game. Nearly 4 hours of video was shot and edited for Realms, and over an hour ended up being cut due to size and space limitations. I'm not even gonna front on this one, kids. The production values and the expertise with which these FMV sequences were made is absolutely top tier shit. I've mentioned in my Killing Time video that I have a love-hate relationship with the usage of FMV and digital actors in computer games, but kids, god damn, this shit is solid gold. Solid fucking gold. Just watching the opening cutscene, I felt chills up and down my spine. This was akin to the kind of suspension of disbelief that I got when watching Blade Runner for the first time back in the day. The way the digital effects and the practical effects are blended together gives a cinematic heft to the telling of this dreamlike narrative, so much so that I genuinely couldn't picture this game existing without the FMV. With all of the quality and the care and the craftsmanship sunk into the development of the game, it was no wonder that Realms of the Haunting debuted to glowing reviews, including some Game of the Year nominations. However, as is the case with games like this, no amount of critical acclaim could withstand the harsh truth of low sales figures. Gremlin had a true gem on their hands, one which they fully expected to be able to roll into developing a sequel for. But even though Paul Green was working on sequel ideas before the development was even finished, those sales figures slowly removed that possibility further and further away until it was simply no longer a financial option. Still, Realms of the Haunting has enjoyed a cult following over the years. I found some interesting and frankly fascinating theories on how the different threads of the story tie together, the hidden meanings behind certain characters, and how the twist ending might not be as much of a twist as we think. And over the years, hints and whispers of Realms' sequel being revived have surfaced again and again, garnering the excitement of adventure gamers with each rumor. But alas, these all appear to have either been smoke and mirrors or simply revivals of old concept art that were meant for the supposed sequel. Now, as far as playing this game today, it's really easy to get up and running. You can buy it on Steam or GOG, and it plays through DOSBox immediately and easily. The controls, however, are a little complicated. They're, to say it's archaic is kind of like saying Tim Willits is a little greasy. It's all arrow keys for movement and various letter keys and control keys for actions. But the main emphasis is on the mouse. This is a point-and-click adventure at heart, after all, and we're definitely going to be working around some awkwardly developed controls as a result. This is one of the criticisms that was lobbied at the game upon release, although primarily in the UK. When the game released out here in the United States, there were a few changes made to the settings, such as the ability to change the difficulty setting of enemies, and the ability to reset the key bindings for the game. All of this is a most welcome change, and is really great for US gamers, but for some strange reason, the currently available digital versions on both Steam and GOG are the UK version of the game. So walking into this experience, I didn't have the ability to set my difficulty or my controls. However, there is a handy dandy patch out on the internet that allows you to change the game from the UK version to the US version, and boy howdy did that sound appealing. Although I couldn't get the patch to work right. Yeah, for some reason it fucked up the audio and refused to let me actually use the key bindings that I had selected. So I had to uninstall the game, reinstall the game, and instead I used a control configuration for the DOSBox files which I found in the Steam forums. This made it so that WASD would move forward, backward, and turn left or right. No strafing for me, unfortunately, although I think this method also made it so that my weapon selection outside of the inventory screen was fucked up. From what I can gather, I should be able to press the 1 through 7 keys to select weapons, but it didn't actually work that way. In a fantastically awkward set of circumstances, I had to open my adventure inventory whenever I wanted to swap out weapons and manually drag them from my pockets to my hands, which definitely didn't break the flow of combat up at all. There are a number of little things about this game which break immersion ever so slightly and prevent it from being what I would consider an absolute tour de force of a horror adventure shooter. But there's no point in me burying the lead with that one, kids, because this game is first and foremost trying to tell a story. So sit down, buckle up, scar your hands with some mystical sigils, and brace yourself for silliness, because this might be the wildest spooky season game that I have played to date. The game opens up with Okay, so this glowing green ball of light falls out of the sky onto some floating island, crashes, sends crystal shards flying everywhere, an angel pops up out of the ground and inscribes some symbols on a circle of rocks. The title tears itself into existence just like in John Carpenter's The Thing, and then we get a brief glimpse of a sword. I promise that all of these images will eventually make some kind of sense, but not by much. Next up, we are introduced to and get an internal monologue from our main character, Adam Randall.
Adam!
Who is musing on the death of his father 6 months prior. It's an impressively frank and mournful dialogue, which immediately struck me with how somber it was.
You think you've got all the time in the world to sort things out? There's always something else to be doing. You'll call him next week. Then the letter from the lawyers, and suddenly it's all too late. Nothing you can do. All the words you wanted to say, silenced. Forever.
Adam continues with descriptions of his current dreams, which are all about a house, some gargoyles, and a strange woman that he's sure he doesn't know, but he feels must be real somehow. Then, continuing his flashback, Elias Camber, a snidely whiplash sort of priest with clearly bad intentions, showed up at Adam's door. Camber said that he was a friend of Adam's father, and that he was given instructions to deliver a mysterious package to Adam if anything bad should happen. Camber is here to do just that. But Adam is smart enough to know that anyone with a mustache like this is clearly a villain, so of course Adam doesn't open the package. Instead, he does some investigating and can't find any information on a priest named Elias Camber anywhere. Always a bad sign. Adam finally gives in and opens the package to discover shards of stone seals inside. One of the things Camber mentioned was that Adam's father had spoken of a house with bad energy, which, as it turns out, looks exactly like the house in Adam's dreams. Well, since this is a horror story, Adam decides to taxi out to the house in Cornwall, grabs a lantern, and begins to search the house for any information he can find. First off, before we dive any deeper into anything about this game, I want it known straight up that Realms of the Haunting is absolutely gorgeous. From the lighting effects, to the detail in the textures, to the brilliant skyboxes, Realms of the Haunting is fully and truly realized through this incredible graphics engine. Holy shit, just comparing footage of Normality and Realms side by side makes it difficult to even see the evolution from one to the other. The power of a capable game engine, combined with excellent production design, really shows through from start to finish here, kids, and the strong visual opening here in the house is maintained all the way to the climax. Once we start the game proper, it's important to note that we get a chapter heading and a chapter number. Realms of the Haunting is divided into 20 chapters, each with a specific set of objectives that we need to complete in order to transition over to the next chapter. This is usually in the form of completing a dungeon of some kind, or discovering a specific item and or portal to the next area we need to progress to. It's a very simple yet effective method of informing the player that significant events have occurred, and our reward for that is continuing the story. Okay, so the house as we see it here is essentially our hub throughout the course of the game. At first, there will be locked doors, as well as doors barred with mystic sigils, so we're not going to have much access to the grounds from the start. A little soft exploration is what we're in for at first. As mentioned previously, our controls are pretty simple. WASD to move about the grounds FPS style, and a mouse-controlled cursor for the point and click aspects. Left-clicking on an object will attempt to use the object if possible, but if we have an item in our hand, it will try using that item first. On easier settings, the game will automatically place the appropriate item in your hand if you try to use an object that requires it. So, for example, if there's a candle that can be lit, simply clicking on it will place the box of matches that we have in our inventory into our hand, and then clicking again will use those matches on the candle to light it. This mindset persists throughout and is really handy until you get to some of the trickier puzzles, in which the game will remind you that you actually have to do some manual sorting and thinking to find the solution. Meanwhile, right-clicking on something will prompt Adam to provide a short description of whatever it is that we're looking at, and just like in any point-and-click style game, you're gonna want to right-click on as many things as possible to learn what they are and how we can possibly gain information from them. Now, this isn't just an adventure. It is a shooter as well, and we'll soon find our first weapon, a Colt 45 in a room close by next to a possessed typewriter. Yeah, just in case we weren't 100% certain that this house was haunted, the typewriter hammering out a page of "we live, we live, we live, we live, we live, we live" on it might be a bit of a clue. Once we've picked up the gun, it is equipped until we equip a different weapon. Shooting operates one of two ways in the game. You can press the left control key to fire straight ahead of Adam, or if there's an enemy in front of Adam, you can left click with the mouse cursor to fire directly at them without needing to turn and face them directly. This took me a minute to figure out and get a handle on, but once I did, I absolutely stuck with the mouse click for fire method as opposed to just shooting straight in front of me. Realms of the Haunting doesn't have the greatest control scheme. Well, it doesn't have the most fluid control scheme for a shooter. Utilizing forwards, backwards, left, and right, essentially the tank controls of FPS games, means that we're going to be facing down enemies which slowly but surely continue to walk towards us even as we fire at them. There are no stun lock mechanics here, kids. We are a normal dude with a Colt 45 shooting at demonic samurai, steampunk monsters, and all manner of strange mystical malfeasance in between. Even once we gather some magic-based weaponry, these enemies will take a pounding in a way that I'm hard-pressed to compare to other shooters, which means that we'll be going through ammunition like sunflower seeds, which in turn means that we'll need to make sure we're properly hunting for supplies. This means using the insert and delete keys on the keyboard to look up or down respectively, although the effectiveness at using these is limited at best when the screen sometimes shakes uncontrollably while trying to just look at the fucking floor. Finally, before we move forward, I want to touch on the inventory screen real quick. This is the meat and potatoes of the adventure side of things. We'll have different sections for keys, weapons, items, magic items, and any scrolls or paperwork that we pick up. Scrolls and letters and the like can be read in a small pop-up window, although I gotta admit that sometimes it felt like there was important information being delivered in such a blasé manner that I couldn't tell if I was learning something important or just casually browsing 300-year-old apocrypha. But using the inventory, right-clicking an object will inspect it, left-clicking it will pick it up, and right-clicking once you've picked up an object will attempt to use it. We're also going to be saving and loading from this screen, as well as checking out information on characters that we meet along the way. As new revelations occur, new information will be made ready for Adam to ponder, but for now, let's get back to the basics. Okay, so we're wandering around the house and we can't unlock anything yet, but there's a portrait of a sarcophagus with 2 lit candles beside it. As it turns out, there's 2 candelabras beside the portrait, so if we light the candles, a secret mechanism opens up and grants us a hidden key. Just don't stand in front of the alcove for too long, otherwise a nasty little blast of energy will surprise you and knock off some of your health. This key unlocks the study, a room that will become very important to us for the next few hours of gameplay. In fact, I might even say that this is the single most important room in the whole of the game. First up though, we get a cutscene in which Charles Randall comes to visit his son from beyond the grave.
Adam. Oh, it is such a joy to see you again, my boy. I wish with all my heart that I could send you away from here. Adam, please don't turn away from me. I need your help. You must free me. I am dead. Yes. My body lies beneath the gravestone. But my soul is trapped, tormented by the darkness that inhabits this place. You are my only hope. This is my prison and my jailer, binding me against my will to suffer the tortures of the damned. The damned is what they are. I cannot help you beyond this message. It is not just a matter of my soul's destiny. Stakes are far greater than you can possibly imagine.
Dad, please. I don't understand.
You must try, my boy. Find Alf. He is a kindred spirit and will be as a brother to you. Once a proud knight, he too is held. They returned. Adam, for the love of God, remember these words. Remember my warnings. You are the last hope.
We don't get too much information, however, because Charles's jailers apparate in order to drag him back to whatever torture beyond the veil he's being subjected to. Searching the study afterwards, we find some gold-plated serpent statues, a broken clock, some various letters, and a record player that sounds like it's channeling the Hell Vision from Event Horizon.
What the hell is that?
If we step out into the hallway, we'll be met by our first enemy, who goes down pretty easily with a few bullets. The pistol is a handy weapon that we'll find plenty of ammo for in the opening hours, and for the most part, we'll dispatch single enemies with minimal effort. But we're going to want to upgrade to something more powerful fairly quickly. Our primary objective is going to be collecting enough serpent statues to place around the sarcophagus and open it up. We can find 5 out of 7 in this room alone, leaving 2 more to track down, which isn't going to be easy. The letters that we find here in the study are all addressed to a man named Claude Florentine, written by his lover, who initials her letters RJ and presents herself with the title of Priestess of the Temple of the Morning Star. This is going to be important later down the line, kids, so make sure you make a note here. There isn't a lot of coherent information to glean from the letters for now, so give them a read if you'd like, but take note of the names and the time frame in which they were written, the late 1920s, early 1930s. At this point, the rest of the house is still either sealed or locked, so we need to study the study in order to find a way towards our next set of items and clues. Investigating the bookshelf carefully reveals a hidden entryway and an enemy blocking our way. Okay, so as we make our way down into the catacombs, one thing stands out about Realms of the Haunting: a lack of a dedicated automap, which feels criminal in light of the fact that there are going to be multiple areas that we discover, rediscover, and open up new aspects of during the course of our quest. The house, for example, grants us access slowly over time and is huge in such a way that it puts the Conway estate from Killing Time to shame. But we don't have an automap, which absolutely serves as a detriment to crisscrossing the labyrinthine areas found in Realms of the Haunting. Oh yes, we can and do eventually find maps for specific areas, including one for the house itself, but these maps can only be accessed from our inventory, and we can only see partial aspects of them, which again, really doesn't fucking help when we're looking for incredibly specific objects in incredibly specific locations. Fortunately, the catacombs here aren't too tricky to navigate. We've got some keys to find, some environmental puzzles to solve, and a new enemy in the form of these steampunk robots. One thing that I noticed was that I was picking up a lot of shotgun shells in the surrounding environment, and yet no shotgun was there in sight. Yeah, that's because back here I took a left instead of a right, and I went deeper into the catacombs rather than off to where the shotgun was located. If I'd gotten the shotgun first and then turned around to investigate further, my run would have been a lot easier on me and my health supplies. But I digress. What we need to do is unlock this Indiana Jones tunnel, down which a voice tells us that anyone who is unmarked is unable to go forward without suffering some serious consequences. I of course had to push my way forward anyway just to see what would happen, and of course Adam gets vaporized if you do. There's something special we need to collect first before we can proceed. I'm running disastrously low on health at this point, which means that I can't proceed forward because I have to fall into this area, which does a quarter bar of health worth of fall damage. So I backtrack to the point where I find the shotgun at last alongside a couple of health flasks. Only takes me 2 or 3 tries to survive the enemies running directly at me before I finally get to save with a decent amount of health again. Here, as I've already mentioned, is part of Realms of the Hauntings' shortcomings. The combat is sometimes decent, but also sometimes kind of ass. Adam is a very squishy boy. Health items are few and far between, and later game enemies tank so much damage that it's kind of laughable. The lack of stun lock makes it so you're constantly on edge, moving as fast as you can out of the line of fire while trying to maintain sight on your foes, which, without strafing, is a fucking chore. This is a game that would benefit from a remaster strictly in terms of movement and combat, because as much as I don't mind the methodicism of it all, it's sometimes tedious to the point of boredom. Alright, so there's an eldritch incantation written on a wall that when spoken aloud in front of a statue opens up a new hallway for me, but there's an item that needs to be slotted into the door here in order for me to unlock it. The Indiana Jones hallway still won't let me pass, so I'm stuck in a kind of hair-tearing frustration that only a point-and-click adventure can provide. At least the game sticks the landing there. I have a sketch of some kind of medieval item that is clearly what needs to go into the slot on the door. I just don't know where to go from here. Well, as it turns out, there's an otherworldly portal that I've been through a few times which leads to a neon green bone throne. Having investigated this room several times already and found nothing, I've kind of passed this off as set dressing and little more. But it turns out I need to click on the chair in order to get Adam to sit down on it, which burns a sigil onto each one of his palms. Okay, that was pretty cool. I'm not sure how I was supposed to know to get Adam to just fucking sit down on that chair, or why he would even consider that in the first place, but there you go. With the sigils in place, the Indiana Jones hallway now allows me passage, where I find an artifact called the Shrive, which just so happens to bear the same markings that have been burned into Adam's hand, and a staff, which appears to be Native American coded. The staff is the first of our mystic weapons, and it works by slowly charging energy over a period of time. At a max charge of 6, most low-level enemies will be vaporized instantly, but at a charge of 1, it'll take a few shots to even make a dent. I like the risk-reward of the staff's power, in that you could potentially wait a bit to allow it to charge and then fire, or simply let off a powerful blast and then swap out to the pistol or shotgun after severely weakening a foe in order to finish them off. But again, later on, kids, when the demons turn tanky and you're running around with multiple mystic weapons that all need to charge up in order to become effective, you'll find yourself swearing and sweating as you swap out one for the other, hoping that a 4-charge blast is going to do some kind of good for you in the face of some of these fucking nightmares. Outside of the Indiana Jones hallway, Elias Camber shows up again, this time in full Snidely Whiplash mode, demanding that Adam hand over the Shrive, but we're a little too smart for that. Camber gets pissy and locks us in a room with a bunch of angry skeletons we have to defeat before we can make our way out. The Shrive fits into the slot on the next door I have to go through, and in the room beyond, I get to meet our next major character, a knight named Alf, which is like, it's just strange the way they spell it, Aelf, and they pronounce it like the funny little alien man that ate cats back in the 80s. When words that start with AE, like aesthetic, ether, and eon, they all ignore the hard A sound and emphasize the way the E sounds. So for AELF to be pronounced as ALF instead of ELF is just... Alright, I'm going off on a tangent here, huh? Alf tells Adam that since he's branded, that means that he's the only one who can wield the Shrive, which is an important artifact in the war against evil, and that there are a lot of people out to kill Adam because of it. Alf mentions that he's the last of the Falshire Knights, a group meant to protect the Shrive, and tells Adam that hidden throughout the house are items that used to belong to him when he was alive. Find the artifacts, have a stronger link to Alf, and Adam will be able to navigate his way through this mess easier. Once Alf disappears, there's a few mega health potions left behind, and then, oh, Jesus Christ! Alright, so while I'm pretty sure you don't need to kill all of these bastards in order to proceed, it's gonna be really useful if you do, because one of the gold serpent statues is here, and we need to find it. So your options are clear the area and do some hunting, or run around like crazy, frantically searching for this gold statue while fighting a bunch of nasty skelly boys who really don't want to die. Again, if you do choose to clear them out, like I did, be advised that this section is going to feel really tedious, as there are so many fucking skeletons here that I genuinely believe that they were respawning half of the time. Regardless of how you proceed, as long as you grab the gold serpent, you won't need to come back down here at a later point in the game. There's going to be a couple of waves of enemies attempting to block Adam's path on the way out, but they're far less annoying than the skeletons. And we'll make our way out of the catacombs and back up to the study, where the second most important character in the game is waiting for us.
I know you, don't I?
Hello, Adam. Dreams are a curious thing, aren't they?
You could say that.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you.
That's all right, I'm getting used to it.
Maybe I can help.
Maybe you could help me? Lady, I just drove for 2 hours in a cab to get to a house in the middle of nowhere. I don't know why I'm here. I'm cold. I'm wet. People are trying to kill me. And to top it all off, I've just had a riveting conversation with my father. And normally that would be great. Except he's dead. And you think you can help me?
Well, if that's the way you feel.
Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it.
I know what you meant. Shall we start again? Right. I'm Rebecca Trevisard.
Pleased to meet you, Rebecca Trevisard. Adam Randall.
This is Rebecca. So, Rebecca here, who looks exactly like the woman in Adam's dreams, and also looks exactly like the woman in these paintings that we saw in the catacombs, is a psychic, a sensitive, a seer, call it what you will, but she definitely seems to know more about what's going on here than Adam does, and certainly more than she's letting on. She wants to come along with Adam, and he reluctantly allows her to, and this sets up my favorite aspect of Realms of the Hauntings game mechanics. With Rebecca as our new companion, anytime we click on an object to interact with it or inspect it, Rebecca will chime in and offer her perspective or thoughts as well. This goes for simple things, such as looking at the environment, or more complex interactions, such as talking about important items or musing on character motivations. It's a fascinating and welcome breath of fresh air, reminding me of Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, where Indy and Sophia can go back and forth about their predicaments, except in that case, Indy has to specifically ask Sophia for her thoughts. Here, Rebecca chimes in automatically, a kind of guide for the player who up until now has been flailing in the dark of the mystery. And with Rebecca as our companion, we now have an anchor to the human component as well as some insight into the metaphysical aspects. It's worth taking the time to go through your entire inventory and list of characters to get her thoughts on everything before proceeding, as this is going to help provide some enlightenment for future events. Also, the dialogue and sometimes witty banter back and forth between Adam and Rebecca is incredibly charming. The actors have great chemistry with each other as well. This is a fantastic pairing, and clearly a lot of thought and time went into making their interactions feel organic. Some of the sigils on the doors in the mansion have now disappeared, opening up new routes for us to explore. There's a bunch of point-and-click mechanics we'll need to interact with, such as turning a sword mounted on a wall to unlock a door, and we'll find a map of the caverns. Keep this in mind for the future. Ultimately, the goal is to locate a green crystal sitting in a fireplace that we can take back to a glowing green dome, and using them with each other transports Adam to ancient Egypt? Rebecca is nowhere to be seen, so somehow it's only Adam here, and after exploring a little bit, he meets up with my least favorite character in the game, the Gnarl. The Gnarl speaks in double talk and vagaries, and essentially provides little more than obfuscated exposition. The Gnarl is somehow a fixed point in the flow of time, a constant that exists within all realities and is known by many names, but is only known as the Gnarl to Adam. He tells Adam that he needs to find his way to the tower, a point that is beyond and between realities, a kind of pathway that intersects all realms so that one can travel amongst them. Conveniently, the Gnarl has 2 Egyptian masks for Adam to take. One for himself, and one for Rebecca, who isn't even here. These are to be used for traveling to the tower, but only in certain instances. I said that I don't like the Gnarl, and it's because this is the only point in the game that this character appears. There's no revelations about him, there's nothing for him to do other than provide these masks to access the tower and to give vague information about the flow of time, multiple realities, blah blah blah. The Gnarl is simply a plot device. One of my least favorite aspects of these kind of horror fantasy stories. I'm sure there's some kind of great meaning and importance to this character who could be anyone and everyone all at the same time, but as it stands, he really only serves to highlight some of the weaker aspects of this game's story, which is that there are a lot of elements which simply provide nothing to the plot. For example, once we have the masks to access the tower, we can now go back to the study and pick up and carry these 3 masks that we had previously found but had been unable to pick up before. Somehow now we can, which you would think means that they're important or can be used somewhere in the game, but they provide absolutely no purpose. You can only inspect them for a brief quip, and that's it. Just like these masks, the Gnarl's importance is so minimal that you could remove the character entirely from the story and it wouldn't change a thing. Now it's time for us to start reality hopping. The portal to the tower is thankfully close by, up the stairs and past the mounted sword. But in order to use the portal, we have to wear the mask. In order to wear the mask, we have to use the mask, meaning left click to pick them up and right click to use. At first, I thought I had to move the mask into one of Adam's 2 hand slots, so it took me a comedic amount of time to figure out how to do this bit. Once I finally got it, Adam and Rebecca put on the masks and travel through the portal, which is a cheesily delightful bit of 90s CGI that plays every single time you go through one of these gates, and it made me smile every single time I saw it. When we land in the tower, we meet with Raphael, who is the shepherd of the tower, and okay, look, Raphael looks so much like Alf that I thought they were the same person, or maybe related, but I don't think that they are. And Raphael is the 4th new character introduced in the past hour with 0 context and a need for several questions afterwards. Realms kind of started to lose me a bit here, and thankfully this interaction is brief, but there are so many characters that get less than a snippet of introduction, yet have a wealth of depth to them that I felt kind of continually lost, yet just kind of clear on what the game was basically trying to tell me at any given point. Here in the tower, we get to travel a series of different paths in order to access the 4 different realms that this universe inhabits. Earth, or as it's known, Helid, Raquia, realm of the spirit, Arqua, the place of the divine, and Sheol, the abode of hell. Following the paths of the tower will lead us to several different portal gates, each of which will take us to different realms. For now, we need to find a portal which leads back to Earth, placing us in the previously inaccessible courtyard of the mansion, where we need to find a key, a map, and in the process, destroy a green rune that is sealing off the door next to the first portal we found. That's gonna open up more of the mansion to explore, and in turn, provide us with another key. Of course, we can't get to the key unless we have a golden serpent statue with us. There's a plaque on the ground here that we need to place the statue on top of, so in my case, I had to go all the way back to the study where I had placed all of the statues I'd found thus far, gather them all, because who knows how many other uses for these I'll find. Spoiler, there are no other uses. Bring the statue back down here, set it, float upwards to grab the key, and then pick up the statue again. Kids, whatever you do, don't forget to pick up the statue. For God's sake, leave nothing behind. I did have some fun crushing enemies in this little trap you can trip by shooting a target beside it, a welcome bit of comedic relief in the midst of some frustrations. And then we come to the caverns. You kids remember that map I told you we picked up, the map of the caverns? Well, here's where we're supposed to use it. Do you kids also remember how I told you that since there's no dedicated auto map, we're strictly relegated to viewing our maps only within the inventory, and that we have to click and drag the image in order to see the whole of the map? I fucking hated this aspect of Realms, and honestly, I'm glad I'm playing this now and not 30 years ago like I would have liked, because we're going to be attempting to navigate true mazes with drop-offs and hidden alcoves that contain extremely necessary items for us to collect. And frankly, I could not be constrained to this method, so I happily looked up the maps for these areas on the Realms wiki and kept them next to me on my phone to make these sections easier. Which is a damn shame that I had to resort to mechanics outside of the game itself in order to make these sections that much less frustrating, because there's some incredible atmosphere here in the caverns, and within other mazes that we'll have to move through. And I honestly would have loved to say that I solved all of these while completely immersed in the game. There's a couple of crystals to pick up, one of which we need to offer as a tribute to a demon statue, fight off a particularly nasty demon, and then pick up Alf's breastplate, which gives us a slight defense boost. I think. There's nothing in the game to indicate that there's any kind of actual defense boost, nor is there anything online I can find to corroborate that, so, you know, here we are. And here we are is just kind of a vague thing in and of itself. It's at this point that Realms starts to both kick into high gear in terms of narrative, but also slows down in terms of environmental escapades, colliding in a sort of foggy sleepwalk that saw me exploring room after room, picking up maps and items that have future relevance but not current relevance, as well as looking through an observatory with multiple scrolls that dump so much information on the player that it feels like the time the Dave Matthews Band dumped literal shit into the Chicago River. There is so much reading here, with so many names being thrown about in absolute seriousness to a degree that I just couldn't take any of it seriously. Maybe I should have been taking notes in order to keep everything straight, but the game is also delivering all of this information via handwritten script on age-old scrolls that we have to read in the same way Adam would be reading it. I got the gist of it for the most part, but the real kicker was going through my list of characters to talk to Rebecca about for new information, and I saw that Elias Camber is actually the priest Claude Florentine, a nugget of information that I swear I was trying to pay attention to, but somehow missed, and I'll be goddamned if I can tell you when or where this actual revelation took place. All I know is that at one point it was revealed that Camber is really Florentine, and I'm just going to accept that and take the L. The biggest thing to take away here is that the mansion itself is the fabled Temple of the Morning Star. The Morning Star being Satan, and so this entire place is a haunting ground of demonic energy ready and willing to see the original fallen angel come back into power. You know, just girly things. But there's a key in the observatory that lets us unlock a cabinet with the final serpent in it. And we also find the Staff of Florentine, which is another mystical energy weapon. Except this one doesn't recharge its energy. It has powerful blasts, possibly more powerful than a halfway charged staff blast, but since I didn't know how I was going to be able to refill the energy on this one, I didn't use it very much until close to the end of the game. But anyways, now we have all the components for unlocking that damn sarcophagus in the study, so let's go see what that's all about.
The statuettes are glowing. Something's happening to the sarcophagus. It's opening.
Is that a ladder down there?
Oh damn. Realms of the Haunting is full of little moments like this, where you think you understand where you are or where you're going, and then you suddenly find yourself walking into a small pocket of unreality beneath an old English mansion. Alright, this next section took me way too fucking long to figure out, so I'm just gonna sum it up. There's a pair of clock hands on the floor here, which we need to adjust to a specific time using a pair of levers up top. If we press the activate switch with the hands in the wrong position, an enemy will teleport in instead to give us grief. Meanwhile, it's very, 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 very important to take note of the art on the walls here of a knight defending himself from a dragon's fiery breath, as this is an important clue towards solving the second half of this puzzle. Back in the study, there's an old grandfather clock whose hands don't work, but it's still ticking. Using the hands on the clock until they reach 6 will cause the clock doors to open, prompting Adam to make some kind of snarky remark about none of it making any kind of sense. Well, it turns out that it does make sense, as it's your clue to set the clock hands in the dragon room to 6 as well, which will allow your entrance to the next area. However, if you've been paying attention to that art on the walls, then you'll understand that you're in for a nasty surprise if you just try to stroll forward into the next area with confidence, because you'll get thoroughly scorched by fireballs, and you will die. Doesn't matter how much health you have. Being stuck, I tried using everything in my inventory, including the knight's helmet that I picked up some time ago, which gave me an interesting flashback to when Alf was alive during medieval times, in which we see him leading a charge against the forces of evil to protect some kind of stone. Well, that's neat and all, but it doesn't stop me from getting barbecued. The answer, once again, is back in the study. I told you kids this was the most important room in the game. There's a shield resting against a wall that appears to be slightly singed, and while we couldn't pick it up before, we can now. With the shield equipped in a weapon slot, we will block the incoming fire damage and at last stroll into the next area. Which is gorgeous, by the way. Look at all of this. And as we stand upon the mosaic in the center of the room, a mysterious voice asks us to release him from his prison so that he can help us. You know, the way things have been going for Adam and Rebecca, I don't think blindly following the requests of unseen figures is something that they should really truly consider. Outside of the lava area is a pair of fountains that have a chalice lying beside each of them. Grab one chalice, grab them both, doesn't matter. But what you'll need to do is walk into the fountain, which will fill the chalice automatically, and then you need to equip the chalice and fire it like a weapon at one of the 2 doors on either side of the angel mosaic. In a bit of adventure game bullshit though, if you pick the wrong door, you'll pick up a false weapon, and you'll be unable to defend yourself in the next segment, and you'll just straight up die, which is great. But if you pick the correct door, it's the one to the left, by the way, you'll find Alf's dagger, our next mystic recharge weapon, and a damn good one at that. But it's also our key to entering the realm of Raquia through the tower, which is our next port of call. Of course, we're not going to be able to just waltz our way into the realm of the spirit without some kind of bullshit, so let's say hi to Belial.
Hello?
Hi. Yes.
Okay, that's a hell of an entrance, though. This motherfucker walks in dressed like a goddamn doctor, wearing a pair of gloves made out of skin, cool as a cucumber in a bowl of hot sauce. Now, we have the option of just straight up giving him the shrive, which supposedly no one can carry unless they have the mark on their palms. But if we do that, Belial will marvel at the fact that his gloves actually work, and then he'll kill us and we get a game over. On the other hand, attacking Belial with Alf's dagger gives us a sweet moment of momentary victory where we blast him in the face with magic fire. And even though Belial isn't dead, Adam gets to drop this sick one-liner.
Well, we still have the shrive.
Belial's gonna be back for that.
Yeah. Can't wait to see his tan.
As we're making our way back to the study so that we can enter the tower, the game introduces a new enemy, the Men in Black. These assholes will teleport in out of nowhere at any time, wielding a pistol and the ability to throw fireballs. A fully charged dagger attack will kill them in one hit, but if there's more than one, or if there's another monster in the area that is trying to get your attention, it can be really easy for the Men in Black to take advantage of your distraction and chop away your health with their fireballs or their fucking hit scan pistol shots. Later on, you're going to be fighting up to 3 or 4 of these bastards at a time, and I hate them so fucking much. Going back to the tower through the portal that we've already found will prompt Raphael to tell us that our princess is in another castle, and that we have to find a different portal to a different corner of the tower in order to find the gateway to Raquia, which means we get to explore new areas of the mansion to do so. I do love the little environmental effects that inform the player when we have new paths open up, such as the rune exploding. Hang on. Such as the rune exploding on the door, informing us that we can now go through. Alright, this next section is also some kind of bullshit, so I'm gonna boil it down real fast. There's a pentagram on the floor here, surrounded by candles, which you're going to need to light in order to complete the summoning ritual. But I didn't know this at the time, and also figured the summoning was for this demon, which appeared literally out of the center of the pentagram here. But you do need to light these in order to get an item to progress. As for me, well, before I figured this out, I ended up wandering around a whole bunch and into the outer courtyard, where I got to slowly chip away at some monsters and discovered a motherfucking blunderbuss, which also has a charge-up attack and hits like a goddamn hammer with explosive damage. The blunderbuss is different from the mystic weapons in that the blunderbuss needs to fully charge a shot before it can be fired again. But the benefit to this is that each shot is going to be incredibly powerful. I found a nice trade-off later in the game where I would attack with a fully charged dagger, open my inventory and swap to the blunderbuss, swap back to the fully charged staff, then back to the blunderbuss. In this cycle, neither the dagger or the staff would be fully charged for a second shot, so I kind of had to play by instinct. Even though opening the inventory screen each time bit into the immersion factor a little bit, it was certainly better than just trying to sit and wait for one individual weapon to charge up enough to be effective. In another part of the courtyard, we get to meet a weird Ghostbuster dog that is... Well, what I think is happening is that it's essentially rendering this portal to the tower ineffective so that we can't ride it to the tower and onto Raquia. So which means we're a little fucked at the moment. In service of sparing you kids the literal hour of meandering I did before finally looking up a walkthrough, let's get down to business and see what happens when we light the candles around the pentagram.
What's happening?
There's something in here with us. It's gone. I must have been imagining it all.
Wrong, Maria. It's the first time for everyone.
Yep, must have been your imagination. Killing the summoned beast results in it dropping a small quartz figurine, which is handy because I found 2 locked doors in my meandering that had a small alcove beside them that required this figurine to unlock. But hey, guess what? Depending on which door you go through first, you might end up playing through the game's chapters out of order. Isn't that great? The door I chose first led to Chapter 10, as opposed to Chapter 9, which is again some bullshit because even though Chapter 9 is incredibly short and is basically a locked library room that you have to fight your way out of, there is a shit ton of lore and exposition in the library that sets up the player for Chapter 10 and the events inside of Raquia. This would have been exponentially useful to know going into Chapter 10, but at the same time, even though I had no idea what was going on, I still had enough of an idea of what was going on to kind of know what was going on. Before we enter the tower, we're introduced to another character, the Gaul, who speaks in riddles and steals a green crystal, which I think is a fragment of the Soul Stone, which is that big green light that came down to Earth in the opening cutscene. Although I don't think this is the first time we've supposedly met Gaul. I found a cutscene of his introduction online, and it's a cutscene that I never got to see. So I think here at this point in the game, we actually do know who he is, except for the... Unless we, oh, for fuck's sake, just start up the Raquia a bit.
Nice place.
Yeah, peaceful.
Raquia is gorgeous. It's a stunning departure from the gloomy, ominous, dilapidated, wastelandic environments that we've been in up to this point. From here forward, the game really begins to lean more and more into the fantasy aspect of the horror fantasy that's been building from the outset. But The beauty of the scenery here doesn't mean that this is a walk in the park. For the first part of Raquia, there are no enemies for us to encounter. Nothing to fight, just simple invitation to exploration. There's like one little demon guy over here, but we can ignore him if we want. Honestly, being able to wander about this beautiful environment after all the stress of running and gunning and sitting at low health for so long feels like a literal breath of fresh air, and I'm pretty sure the developers at Gremlin intended this. Of course, if you kids remember, there was a map we found of the Raquia area earlier in the game. This map details pathways through a huge hedge maze, and the locations of 4 objects we're going to need to collect in order to proceed past the tests of Raziel, a trickster spirit who guards the Key of Tears, which we need to release the mysterious voice back in the mosaic. Raziel is an interesting figure because for me, since I accidentally skipped to chapter 9, there was absolutely no insight or mention of him before getting to this point. Raphael mentioned him when we were trying to find our way to the Raquia portal in the first place, but I didn't remember this conversation with Raphael because it happened almost an hour and a half before I even found my way to Raquia, so without the info dump found in chapter 9, I was casually and deeply fucking lost during this part. What's necessary to know is that Raziel enjoys playing games, and he takes his rules very seriously. Long story short is that if we do anything to make too much noise during these tests that he set before us, we will awaken his spirit and will end up permanently imprisoned in this realm. Which, you know, since we're trying to save the goddamned universe and everything, that would be really bad. First up is the hedge maze, and the 4 items within it that are necessary for the tasks ahead. One of those items is a bejeweled haunch of meat, the second is a pair of earplugs, the third is a pan flute, and the final item is a ring with no setting. The jeweled meat we'll need to use on the metal lion standing guard outside the castle. The earplugs allow us to enter a room with a deadly siren and not fucking die from the sound of it. The pan flute unlocks a specific door within the trials, and the ring, when completed with the setting, grants us access to the Key of Tears itself. Before finding the setting, there are a number of excellent adventure game puzzles we have to navigate through, all of which involve us exploring a series of rooms to knock out some mini puzzles, and the task in each is going to be either A, don't make enough noise to piss off Raziel, or B, don't die. Even though there were clear consequences for fucking up these puzzles, they were just brain-teasing enough and just vague enough for me to feel absolutely accomplished once I was able to work out the solutions on my own without any walkthroughs. Once we get the Key of Tears, we have to escape Raquia, which is now being invaded by numerous demons and men in black out to kill us. This was one of the most frustrating parts of the game for me, partially because all of the enemies combined really cut down my health to almost nothing, and partially because I hadn't found any health restoratives in a long time, so there was a healthy amount of save scumming involved with completing this area. And also the fact that successfully finding my way back to the portal to the tower had Rebecca state that it was probably a bad sign that the realm of the spirit was overrun with evil demons. This, I assumed, was an intonation to head back and make sure that I killed everything here, despite the fact that I was incredibly low on health and had to continually swap between the staff, dagger, and blunderbuss. But I also didn't want to find out what happened if I didn't go back and kill them all. Maybe it would lead to a bad ending, you know, with a piece of the universe corrupted and all, and then maybe I would have to play the whole game over in order to get the good ending. So I spent a good half hour trying and dying until I finally killed everything in that goddamn Garden of Delights. I'm 99% sure I got every last demon in Raquia, and Rebecca still said that it was probably a bad idea that the demons were haunting the realm of the spirit, at which point I decided that, fuck it, bad ending or no, I had to maintain my 1 HP and try and push forwards toward any hidden health items. Spoiler alert, none of what I did just then mattered, and it didn't affect the ending in any way. I could have absolutely just run past all of them, and it wouldn't have fucking mattered. Once we're back on Earth, it's time to head down to the mosaic and use the Key of Tears to release the owner of the mysterious voice and see who they are. It's some dude in a t-shirt and leather pants. Okay, like I was expecting something a little more outlandish, maybe a little more angelic, something fantastical, but this guy just looks like he's headed out to a Nine Inch Nails concert circa Pretty Hate Machine, and he's really hoping that the girl he's with will be impressed with his absolutely vanilla sex moves. Hawk, to keep it brief, is a being manifested by the Soul Stone. just like Gaul. Hawk and Gaul are vessels meant to receive the full powers of good and evil, respectively, and they're big pieces in the great machine of everything happening in the background here. Hawk is, for better and for worse, our largest info dump on anything and everything that we've seen up until this point, as we get the chance to ask every single question under the sun in order to find some sort of meaning within this story. Although, I have to admit, while this is all written fairly well, the sheer volume of information I was asked to absorb in this exchange was a little overwhelming at best. Long story short, the Shrive is a piece of a sword called Eternity, and only when the two pieces are put together can the forces of good have a weapon that can defeat the forces of evil. Standard issue fantasy fare, but now Adam and Rebecca have to go in search of the sword itself. The next section takes place in the parish of St. Michael's, where Charles Randall used to preach, and I think that this might be my least favorite part of the game. And yes, for those of you who have already played this game in the past, I really dislike this segment more than the Trials of Sheol, but the rest of you kids will have to wait for that. St. Michael's is a convoluted and complicated sequence of events that really had me absolutely baffled at first. It opens with a bunch of men in black chasing us around outside, and once again, I'd like to remind you kids that this game doesn't exactly hand out healing items on a silver platter, so I died a lot just trying to get inside the parish here, and also died a lot in exploring the area around once I had. There are locked doors with keys hidden behind other locked doors whose keys are hidden behind doors that are magically sealed. And if we don't find a way to dispel the seals, we won't be able to find any of the items that we need. And from the moment that we land, the portal back to the tower is sealed off, so we're here until we solve the mystery, gang. Okay, so we have to blast open this seal with the dagger in order to get inside the vicarage, but the dagger only works on the outer door, not on any of the seals inside this house. There's a magic flashlight that shows us where there are hidden seals and hidden doors, and there's a magic wand underneath the doormat that we can use to destroy the seals. Meanwhile, outside, there's a monster that jump scares us if we try to enter the church, but killing it drops a coin on the ground. If we pick up the coin and use it in the offering box, the church will unlock and let us inside. We'll have to wander about the vicarage, destroy all the sigils, find the keys to unlock the doors within the house, observe a book catch fire and fall from a bookshelf, then inspect the book for a key inside of it, after which we can find another pair of keys, as well as a pair of stained glass feathers to use on a statue, which grants us Elf's helmet, which will allow us access to Arqua and the final series of tests. This whole area is far too overdone to be any kind of fun. First off, I didn't think to check the doormat for a hidden magic wand, so I ran around for forever trying to find some kind of way to break the seals, which hurt you if you touch them. On top of that, I didn't know the monster outside dropped the coin on the ground. I just happened to find it after the fact, and then I used it on the offering box. Lucky break for me. And the worst of these moon logic puzzles was the burning book. Attempting to take it from the shelf caused me the slightest bit of damage when I did, so I thought it was just some booby trap set by Florentine expecting me to inspect the bookshelves. I didn't notice the book fall to the floor, nor did I notice that the book was still on the ground in such a way that I might want to pick it up afterwards. Realms of the Haunting, while gorgeous, is not well set up for these kinds of puzzles. Random items dropped on the ground that are incredibly important for us to progress aren't going to present themselves to us very well unless it's painfully obvious that this object has fallen to the ground and that we need to pick it up. In traditional point-and-click adventures, we have a view of the whole scene surrounding us, so it's easier to tell when a purposeful item is waiting for us to grab it. In a first-person shooter like this, where we have minimal ability to look up and down, having objects drop on the floor and expecting the player to forcibly shove the janky camera into a position that's really only meant for old men with back problems is not an effective method of environmental clues. I spent an hour and a half here in St. Michael's because, whether you kids who have played this game already agree with me or not, I did not feel like this shit was telegraphed very well. So, give me my fucking helmet and let me get the fuck out of here. Finding the gateway to Arqua, Realm of the Divine, wasn't difficult because I stumbled across it multiple times, and each time a Waverly voice told me to tread carefully because I was approaching the Realm of the Divine. Arqua is a welcome breath of brain-teasing fresh air after the madness of St. Michael's. Entering this realm, we've temporarily lost pretty much the entirety of our inventory except the masks that activate the tower gateways, which means we are relying solely on our brain power to battle these puzzles and win the Sword Eternity. A note placed in our inventory explains briefly what we're going to have to do. Find items that can be used together to create the 4 elements of nature, then combine those elements together into an offering to the gods. And if they are pleased, we get the sword. Where St. Michael's attempted to mix traditional point-and-click bullshittery with first-person shooter action pieces, Arqua sticks strictly to what makes really good adventure games really good. There are just enough clues for us to figure out how to access all of the items we need to create fire, water, wind, and earth, and then just enough clues for us to figure out how to assemble them into a hookah? And then we offer the hookah to the Liquidian gods here in Arqua as a peace offering. I guess. And then we're off to the races once more. The Sword Eternity is easily the best weapon in the whole fucking game, and it's well worth the wait for it. It works similar to Link's sword from Legend of Zelda. The first swing shoots out a powerful fireball blast, which then needs to be charged up before you can use the blast again. But in the meantime, you can keep swinging the sword for melee damage, meaning you're constantly on the offensive no matter what, and that second fireball attack is usually the finishing blow on whatever you're fighting. It's a great fucking weapon, and the fact that it is basically taken away from you right away is about as amusing as getting a catheter installed with no warning. As soon as we teleport back to Earth, Belial is there waiting for us with Charles Randall in tow. Belial's face is partially melted from our last encounter, and he is reasonably pissed about that. And Adam, thoroughly feeling himself now that he's got the Sword Eternity, decides to stride forward and just take Belial head on. What happens next is... well, let me just show you, and I promise I have not edited this next bit of footage in the slightest.
Well, what are you going to do, Adam?
Okay, you bastard. Let's do it.
Adam.
Well then,
What's going on? Where am I?
you are in my hands, as indeed are these. Shit. Quiet.
Yeah, the game just straight up cuts from Adam getting ready to step in and fight to him being in wherever this prison is. He's just as confused as I was. Luckily, after sitting around for a minute feeling sorry for himself, Adam is rescued by Rebecca. She tossed him her necklace before the fight, which allowed her psychic powers to track him down. This whole transition is one of the bigger question marks for me in the whole game. The chapter name, The Prisoner, has no number. The game gives you partial control of Adam between two different cutscenes, and then as soon as Rebecca saves us, it's back to numbered chapters. I just didn't understand what the hell was going on here. Why couldn't we get a brief glimpse of how Belial caught Adam? Why did we have to show it in such a convoluted manner? Anyways, point being now is that Belial has the Sword Eternity and the Shrive thanks to his skin gloves. So if we want to save the world, we'd better go get them back. We're quickly strolling into the endgame now, and I think at this point the game has completely given up on any of these puzzles making any kind of actual sense. Over the course of the game, we've been slowly collecting the 3 journals of Florentine, and in order to unlock the gate to the next area, we have to toss each of the 3 journals into these pyres, which... okay, at least the game knew to put the journals in my hands and throw them in. I wouldn't have known to do that. I didn't see any hints or clues that we had to do that. Then it's a swift stroll through a gentle hedge maze towards the tower portal, and we're on our way to Sheol. Of course, we're not going to get far unless we thoroughly explore this section of the tower and find the spot where Belial has very handily hidden the sword and the shrive, for which I am very grateful, although I am now once again questioning the whole point of the render the hero powerless by taking away the ultimate weapon he just collected segment if it was really only going to last for 20 minutes. We can't enter Sheol straight away. We have to go through 3 madness-inducing tests first. And believe me when I say, I'm not saying this lightly. In my research post-game, I have found that the majority of fans of this game absolutely hate these 3 trials, in particular, the first section. Before we enter, we have a brief chat with a character named Abaddon, the Keeper of Sheol, who gives us more vague and ominous information, and then we're off through the Emerald Archway to the first test. Strangely, though, we land there with no Rebecca in sight, so Adam has to tackle this alone. Now, in principle, I really like this first area from an aesthetic standpoint. The gray, harsh, bone-like structures all around us resemble some kind of nest, built out of the resin of some geek Seeger-esque creature, and we're tasked with wandering about the structure to find 11 pulsating brains to feed into this brain machine, which lowers the central platforms and allows escape. All of this combined is giving gnarly Hellraiser vibes, which is really fucking cool. Except there's no map for this area. Not in-game or one officially online, so you could be stuck wandering about this really, really tight maze for a long time, tearing your hair out to find the brains. There's even one brain hidden behind the brain machine itself, just to add insult onto injury. Like Gremlin willfully intended for this section to be some kind of bullshit. Thankfully, I found a hand-drawn map by a user on Steam, which was their best guess at how this structure worked and where all the brains were, so thank you for that. There's a quick boss fight before we can leave this area, and also, thankfully, I checked my walkthrough so I would know that I had to click on the fallen demon to pick up a parchment, which would allow my escape, which... you know, this fucking game is so vague sometimes. I want it to be a little bit more straightforward. Like, don't make me search a dead body when for 90% of the rest of the game, I don't have to search dead bodies. Returning from the brain room, Adam finds Abaddon wrestling with Rebecca, but it turns out this isn't Abaddon. It was Florentine in disguise all along, and he calls Rebecca Rebecca Jane, which prompts Adam to think all the way back to near the beginning of this video, to the letters written to Florentine by a certain RJ, priestess of the Temple of the Morning Star. Yep, that's right, kids. Rebecca here is the mysterious RJ, which means she's actually a few hundred years old. Gotta love a cougar. And since those were love letters that we found, it's a safe assumption that she and Florentine were making the beast with two backs. You know, having sexual congress. You know. They were Adam feels naturally betrayed by this revelation, despite the fact that Rebecca is fully on the side of good and has been helping him for the last 7 hours of in-game playtime. She didn't tell him the truth of her because she was worried that he wouldn't trust her, but boy, oh boy, does he not trust her now, and he proceeds to dive back into the second test of Sheol on his own, butthurt and boy angry. The second test is pretty simple. Wander through the structure we find ourselves in, find all of the mirrors, shatter them, and we're good. Demons will emerge from the mirrors as we pass, but they'll die instantly once we break the mirror they come out of, so they're not too much of a threat as long as you know what to do. The biggest takeaway from this section is that we find the real Abaddon imprisoned in glowing light. He gives us another info dump, one that's slightly easier to digest than Hawk's was, and he basically tells us that everything which has happened so far is part of a long chain of prophecies, in which it was said that great peril would come to the Soul Stone and evil would attempt to flourish, but that balance would be restored to the universe. Abaddon is the guardian of the Soul Stone, and he knew he would be imprisoned here by Florentine per prophecy, so he's perfectly unconcerned with what has happened. Someone will be taking over his duties as a part of this prophecy, and Adam will restore the balance. Even Rebecca is a part of all of this, although according to Abaddon, her name had been hidden in the prophetic legend to protect her role in what was to come. Not Adam though, his name is all over the fucking prophecy, so everyone knew which kid to pick on in high school. Leaving here, we meet up with Hawk, who absolutely brutalizes a demon, and then proceeds to tell us that everything is coming to the end. There is a gathering of sorts that Hawk is bound to, a gathering of beings created and perpetuated by the Soul Stone. He warns Adam that the seventh seal is barely holding the universe together, and that Adam has the power to either prevent the seal from breaking or to perpetuate the end of everything. So, you know, no pressure or anything. This final test is a series of switch puzzles, and when each puzzle is completed, it unlocks a dial at the entryway to each puzzle. Now, after the fact, I read a walkthrough on what you need to do to get through this one, and I'm gonna be frank, I didn't follow the walkthrough at all. I somehow brute forced my way through this one. No clues, no hints, no nothing. But the path that I ended up taking is not the path that I've read I needed to take. In fact, I didn't even go through half of the puzzles here in this section of the trials, and I still somehow managed to summon the demon boss that I needed to defeat. I mean, don't get it twisted, kids. I enjoyed this section, just like I enjoyed the brain puzzle section of Arqua, and I think it's a great reminder that Realms of the Haunting really understands how to craft a great experience when it comes to the adventure aspects of the game. Sometimes, though, that pesky need for first-person actioning just unfortunately gets in the way. But this is it. We've successfully navigated the trials of Sheol. Now, we get to cross the Rubicon on our way to the finale and the final showdown. Landing in Sheol, we're greeted with peaceful scenery, floating islands, some demons coming at us here and there, Nothing too harsh at first. Then we find Belial, which, as I found out afterwards, could happen actually a number of ways. You kids remember that demon that we killed in the brain area? The one with the parchment on its dead body? Well, it turns out we didn't actually need to pick up that parchment in order to be able to leave the area. It was a little bonus, which granted us the power to see through illusion. I thought it meant the illusion of the Emerald Archway exit, but it actually meant the illusions that Belial can create. If we hadn't picked that up, the cutscene where we find Belial here in Sheol would be very different. Instead, we would see Rebecca chained to a rock, and after Adam has a moment of weakness, it would turn out that she was an illusion crafted by Belial to steal the sword from Adam. There's even a fun little cutscene that can apparently be triggered if you rush forward headfirst into Belial right away after he's stolen the sword from you, where he'll stab Adam, they'll have a conversation about dying, and Adam, bleeding out mind you, will grab Belial by the dick to catch him off guard, and then the two of them will fall into the abyss together. That's actually kind of badass. If we do have the parchment, we won't be fooled by any illusions, and instead, we'll just see Belial apparate out of thin air and we'll get down to fighting. Me? I had my sword, so I strode up to the bastard and I chopped away until he fell. The next section is a kind of lightweight, kill anything that stands in your way type of gauntlet where we're essentially running through Sheol to get to the final tower gate that will take us to Florentine and the Gathering. Florentine is being an arrogant little bitch, taunting Adam, trying to get Adam to strike him down. He even goes so far as to tell Adam that combining the Shrive with the Eternity Sword is the only way to kill Florentine at this point. Okay, bet. But Adam is a little smarter than that. He can tell Florentine is taunting him into taking a swing. And even when Florentine turns his back to Adam, there's just something that isn't right about all of this. And it's true. If you do decide to attack Florentine at any point, you'll accidentally destroy the seventh seal, which he's wearing around his neck, and that's the end of the universe. I had a feeling this was happening. Look, the goddamn seal is right there. It's just hanging from his neck like a Flavor Flav timepiece. So I, of course, stalled out. I took the path of peace, and then after Florentine paralyzes Adam and everything seems lost, here comes Rebecca, distracting Florentine long enough for Alf to appear and fucking javelin a sword through Florentine, killing him. Rebecca saves the seventh seal as Florentine does a nosedive into the pit. Hawk punches Gaul into literal oblivion, and we've won the day.
If you'd used eternity against Florentine, you would have smashed this seventh seal.
We never stood a chance. I might be stupid, but I'm not crazy.
I'm not so sure about that, Adam.
Remember that fucking line, kids! For all intents and purposes, we now have our happy ending. Rebecca, unfortunately, now has to take Abaddon's place as Guardian of the Soul Stone, which has been part of the prophecy the entire time, so they get to have a brief goodbye. Which is bittersweet, honestly. Adam and Rebecca have had great chemistry during the entire game, and the fact that there's only fate and the roles that they play is genuinely a little heartbreaking here. Adam plunges eternity into the Soul Stone, restoring the balance of the universe and the seals, and he gets to have one last conversation with his father, which is such a warm thing to have here, kids. I mean, after all, Adam began his whole journey here on a mission to find out what happened to his father. And despite all of the universe-ending threats, it still all comes down to a boy saving his father. And I'm not crying, you're crying. Charles warns Adam that the mansion is going to collapse and that he won't be able to get out if he doesn't move quickly enough. And after their embrace, we're dropped right into the outer courtyard of the mansion where we need to book it all the way through back to the front door. And that's not going to be easy because we've got a bunch of men in black and other demons in our way. On top of that, the fucking Ghostbusters dog that we saw in that one cutscene way back hours ago is now blocking the front door, and we can't escape until we kill this goddamn thing. And Jesus fucking Christ, is it tough to kill. By the way, the Ghostbusters dog is a creature called the Dodger, which is in league with a presence called the Ire, something that permeates the whole of the tower. And, you know, That's all information that exists within the game, but never at any point does it outright state that this Ghostbusters dog is the Dodger. And the Dodger is mentioned several times within the course of this narrative as this uncontrollable force of nature that Florentine had attempted to control, but had only succeeded in allowing it to escape from the tower. And I swear to God, for me, without this information handily handed to me beforehand, I just had to fight this demon dog that I didn't remember from a brief cutscene literally hours prior in my playthrough. But once we kill the dog, we're out of the house, which collapses in green fire, and we've won the day. Almost. We see the collapse of the house reflected in Adam's eye. Then we cut to the interior of an asylum, where Adam is locked in a cell, telling the end of his story. A faceless doctor takes notes about his tale, and then a nurse who looks exactly like Rebecca appears to give Adam his medication, and then we roll credits. What the fuck? Okay, so this is a very interesting twist end to the game, one that's been kind of telegraphed from the start. Adam's dreams about Rebecca, her face appearing in the catacombs artwork, Belial first appearing to Adam dressed in a doctor's outfit, Alf's line when Adam says that he's not crazy. There are other elements at play here all throughout which support the twist ending that Adam was mentally unstable all along, and that what we just played was a product of his maligned brain. However, it could also be that his journey affected him in such a way that it landed him in the crazy house, a very Lovecraftian style finale where our protagonist was driven mad by the events that he witnessed. From what I've read, the ending of Realms of the Haunting was changed very close to the end of production, and since the devs at Gremlin were already deep into planning a sequel to this title, the meaning behind this twist would no doubt have been elaborated on in said sequel. However, since those sales didn't do what Gremlin was hoping it would, with the cancelled sequel, we'll never have any kind of closure as to what this ending is supposed to mean. Which leaves pretty much the entirety of the game open to interpretation, and in all honesty, I kinda like that. Realms of the Haunting both fascinates and frustrates me. The choice to combine first-person shooter and point-and-click adventure elements is part of the fascination. For the most part, both are implemented very well. The controls are smooth and responsive. It feels good to play. And I didn't really at any point find myself at odds with the mechanics of the gameplay. However, the frustration lies in not the basics of what the game does, but in the ultimate combination and collision of them. Sometimes combat is fun, but about a third of the way through the game, it becomes a chore, with enemies that are too tanky and weapons that take too long to use. The adventure elements are mostly well done, but there's a lot of moon logic here and there, and lack of explanation for certain things, and man, oh man, when I discovered that I had to look under that goddamn doormat for a magic fucking wand in order to progress, I was livid. The St. Michael's segment encapsulates everything that Realms doesn't get right, from the combat to the puzzles. But then again, when Realms is firing on all cylinders, it's a welcome, intriguing, immersive experience through a truly wacky story that doesn't quite gel. And hell, sometimes it doesn't even let you play it in order. But if you're into the idea of a horror fantasy story that takes itself seriously, even when the player might not do the same, this is a decent time to be had. And I'm sure that a second playthrough would help make a lot more of the story elements make sense for me, but then again, we're talking about a 14-hour game, so it's not like this is something you could just clock through in an afternoon. I find myself charmed by this one, kids. Utterly charmed. Sure, the controls are broken and require fiddling. There are way too many items and way too many difficult to navigate sections. And the story left me confused and scratching my head so many times that I probably have a bald spot forming. What works here really works, and what doesn't work really doesn't work. But the gameplay and the urgency of the story here is solid enough that I kept willingly coming back for more, leaned forward in my chair, invested in what was going on. The vibes, kids. The vibes are very strong with this game, and the sheer charm of Adam and Rebecca quipping back and forth along the journey made me smile constantly. Overall, I think I'm going to give Realms of the Haunting a 7.5 out of 10. I really want to give it an 8, but there's just enough holding it back that I have to keep it real. Charming, moody, and serious to a fault. This game is one that absolutely demands a remaster to fix up the combat mechanics a little and to provide modern gamers a chance to play this interesting intersection of different genres. And that's it, kids. We did it. Happy Halloween. Thank you, as always, for coming on this journey with me, for getting through another spooky month in one piece. I think that overall, this has been the best spooky month so far, and I'm hoping that you feel the same. If you want to help support me making these videos for you, there's a link to my Patreon in the description, along with a link to the Ranger Station Discord where you can come chat and hang out with me and all the other members, as well as get some inside info on future content. Alright kids, it's time for me to go put on my costume, pound the pavement in search of candy, and maybe even have a spooky surprise or two. Remember to carry flashlights and glow sticks so that you can be seen in the dark, brush your teeth after all of that candy, and as always, stay hydrated. I'll see you next time.